Jacob had always been the kind of man who did what was expected. He woke up every morning at the same time, made a quick breakfast, and went to his job downtown. To anyone on the outside, everything looked fine. But inside, Jacob moved through life as though the colors had quietly faded away. Each day felt exactly the same, predictable, safe, and strangely empty. He often stared out the window on the train, watching people pass by, and wondered if they were feeling the same loneliness he tried so hard to ignore. He couldn't remember the last time he laughed from his heart or woke up excited for a new day. Even the things that once brought him comfort, music, long walks, cooking his favorite meals, now felt like meaningless tasks. Friends sometimes invited him to hang out, and he always said yes, but halfway through the night he would drift into silence, pretending to listen while feeling completely disconnected. Happiness didn't feel lost. It felt distant, like a childhood memory he could no longer reach. One evening, after another long and silent dinner, Jacob sat alone in his living room and stared at a photo on the wall. It was him as a child, running across a field under a bright summer sky, smiling as if the world belonged to him. For a brief moment, he felt something stir deep inside, a faint memory of what it felt like to be truly alive. But as quickly as it came, it faded, leaving behind a quiet ache and a single question. When did everything become so numb? He tried to distract himself by keeping busy. He worked extra hours, signed up for weekend projects, and filled every spare moment with activity. But even in the middle of crowded rooms, he felt alone. It wasn't that anything was wrong, it was that nothing felt right. Each morning, Jacob looked in the mirror and saw a man who had forgotten how to feel. He wondered if it was normal, or if something inside him had quietly broken over time. One Saturday, while walking through the city, he passed a small park and saw a group of children playing. Their laughter carried across the air, light and free. He paused for a moment, leaning against a tree, and watched them chase after a kite. There was something so simple and pure in their joy that it caught him completely off guard. A thought appeared in his mind so clearly it almost startled him. When was the last time I felt something like that? That night, Jacob couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about that moment in the park, not because it made him happy, but because it made him realize how long he had been disconnected from life. He wondered if happiness was something that only belonged to the past. But then another thought entered his mind. What if it wasn't gone? What if it was simply buried beneath the weight of his routine? The next morning, Jacob woke up a little earlier than usual. He didn't have a plan. He just opened the window and let the cool air fill the room. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to sit in silence without trying to escape it. He listened to the sound of birds in the distance and the gentle hum of the city waking up. It wasn't happiness, but it was the first time he felt a bit more present. Later that day, he decided to walk to a nearby bookstore he used to love but hadn't visited in years. He wandered quietly through the shelves and stopped in front of a section filled with old poetry books. One of the pages he opened read, "To feel nothing is not the end of a story. Sometimes it is the beginning of a search." Something inside Jacob softened. He stood there for a long moment, holding the book close, as if the words were speaking directly to him. That evening, instead of turning on the TV, he picked up a notebook and wrote one sentence. "I don't know how to feel happy, but I want to learn again." The sentence looked small on the page, but it felt like a quiet declaration. It reminded him that maybe feeling lost didn't mean he was hopeless. Maybe it simply meant there was something he still needed to find. In the days that followed, Jacob continued to write in his notebook. He didn't force anything grand or poetic. He simply wrote about how each day felt. Some pages were blank. Some were filled with small observations, like, "The sunlight looked warm on the trees," or "The coffee tasted better this morning." They were small moments, but noticing them made him feel just a little less numb. Slowly, small changes began to appear. He started going for short walks after work, not to reach any destination, but just to notice the world around him. He sat in the park again and watched the wind move through the leaves. The emptiness was still there, but now it felt less heavy, as if life was gently reminding him that there were still pieces of beauty hidden in ordinary places. One afternoon, a stranger at the park smiled at him and said, "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Jacob nodded, and for the first time in a long time, genuinely agreed. It wasn't a life-changing moment, but it made him realize that he had spent so long closed off from the world that he forgot how simple kindness could feel. He began reconnecting with old hobbies, even if they didn't feel exciting at first. He pulled out his old guitar and played a few chords, awkward and rusty. It didn't sound good, but it didn't need to. It reminded him of the nights he used to stay up late playing music just because it made him feel something. And slowly, almost unnoticeably, a small spark began to return. Jacob also started being honest with his closest friend. One evening, he quietly admitted, "I think I forgot how to be happy." Instead of judging him, his friend simply listened. That simple act of being heard brought him a sense of relief he hadn't felt in years. It taught him that he didn't have to pretend to be okay all the time. Sometimes sharing the truth was the first step towards healing. Over time, the empty feeling began to shift. There were still difficult mornings and lonely nights, but now they were mixed with brief moments of warmth, like reading a chapter of a good book, feeling the sun on his face during a walk, or laughing at an old memory. It wasn't the dramatic happiness people showed online. It was quieter, more fragile, but also more real. Jacob realized that happiness wasn't something he could force or chase. It was something that slowly returned when he allowed himself to be honest, present, and gentle. He learned that sometimes the heart needs time to remember how to feel again. And during that time, the smallest acts of kindness to himself mattered more than any grand gesture. One evening, he looked out the window and noticed how beautiful the city looked under the soft glow of streetlights. He didn't smile because something amazing happened. He smiled because he finally felt genuinely alive again, even if only for a moment. And for the first time, that small moment felt enough. He went back to his notebook and wrote, "I'm still learning, but today I felt something again." That sentence made him feel proud, not because everything was perfect, but because he realized he wasn't numb anymore. He was slowly returning to himself, one honest moment at a time. The days that followed were not always easy, but Jacob learned to cherish the small steps. He reminded himself that healing doesn't always look like fireworks. Sometimes it looks like quiet mornings, soft sunsets, and gentle words. And the more he focused on those small moments, the more he realized that happiness had not disappeared. It had simply been waiting for him to slow down long enough to feel it. If you've been living each day without happiness, please remember this. Feeling numb doesn't mean you failed. It simply means your heart is asking you to reconnect. Start with small things. Notice the breeze. Write down what you feel. Speak honestly with someone you trust. You don't have to fix everything right away. Just take one gentle step at a time. If this story touched you, take a moment to leave a comment about one small step you want to try, and consider subscribing so we can continue walking through these stories together.